Dr. Joseph Martin. Welcome. Expansion, universal law of creation. This is part 2 of 2. We just did the one on pressure and on contraction. This is the other law of creation that is complementary to contraction and pressure, which is expansion. So we're going to take a look at that in all the facets we can. Now, just want to say a little bit, first of all, before we get into expansion, that this is a natural kind of flow in time of contraction and expansion. It happened with the Big Bang, which came in on itself and then expanded into the universe. And our best and latest theories of astronomical galactic growth in the cosmos or the cosmology is that the stars expand and then they contract a bit, and then of course galaxies and the universe itself expands a bit in space, in terms of space, and also in terms of higher vibrational dimensionality, not just space but higher vibrational dimensionality, then contracts a bit and then expands more and then contracts and it keeps expanding like this. Now this seems to be again a universal law that's right all the way down through every layer of the universe, down to the single atoms and also cells and human bodies and animal bodies. For instance, we know that our own biology is all based on the fact that our lungs, they contract when we push the air out, and then they expand when we take the air in. So contraction of the lungs and expansion as we take more air in. We do this because we need oxygen. Oxygen is what supplies our brain and our nerves and our biochemistry, our metabolism. Nothing would happen unless we were able to deal with this process. And we would die actually without breath, wouldn't we? Okay, we can only go for about 3 minutes maximum without it. So this is important to the human physiology as well. In terms of bodily functioning as well, when we feel run down, we feel that we need food to supply us with food that's holding in potential energy in the form of carbohydrates or fats or lipids or proteins. And that has to be taken in, digested with the stomach acids through the intestines and through the intestinal wall. And it changes the biochemistry. It's taken into the smaller forms that can be taken into the cells, and there within the process of the small process of the Krebs cycle inside with the mitochondria, you can see that all the food substances, the matter, is turned into energy. And that energy fuels the muscles, it fuels the nervous systems, two nervous systems, and it fuels the brain and the nerve cells in the brain. It fuels everything in us. So we need this constant transformation through this process. Well, let's go back to expansion. We'll look at the etymology of what this is. Expansion comes from the Latin word expandere, which means obviously in English to expand. And in the late Latin, it means expansionem, which means spreading out. So this kind of a sense, spreading out, and it does have a spatial configuration to it, doesn't it? In French, we use the word expansion, and also in the 1640s, as science was coming back to our civilization after many tens of thousands of years since the last golden age, we have the notion of the act of expanding, which became involved in the notion of physics, which we'll get to in a second, and also chemistry. So in chemistry, we have the notion of an increase in volume when you add heat. So the volume might expand, but the mass stays the same. That's very critical to remember when we're talking about chemistry and physics. Now, in the laws of physics, and these are the old laws, they still kind of are used today, but we'll see that very soon they will be changing. In the laws of physics, and I'm talking about the 3 laws of thermodynamics here, the first law of thermodynamics is within a closed system, if no heat is added, there will always be an equilibrium. In a closed system, no heat added, there will always be an equilibrium. Now, the factors we look at in thermodynamics, which is a subsection of what we study in physics, are the factors of temperature or heat, energy, and also entropy and pressure. Well, we've already dealt with pressure in the previous video, and let's talk about entropy, which is the second law of thermodynamics. People banter this notion around all the time to suggest a very important kind of concept, which I really want to impart to you now as a very absolutely central concept for cosmology, astronomy, anthropology, psychology, biochemistry, and also your own thinking about yourself and your future. And the second law of thermodynamics goes like this. Within a closed system, heat cannot and will not move from a colder section of the system to a hotter section of the system. Heat does not do that. It's not like you can say, oh, we'll take all the rest of the heat from the cold section and move it to the hotter section. It cannot, it will not. It contravenes all the known laws of creation and physics and chemistry and movement and energy. So what will happen in entropy means this. It means maximum falling apart, maximum randomness, maximum dispersion, this movement of energy from the hottest area to the coldest area. And then eventually, as you move down, it gets colder and colder. It's more random, it's more chaotic, if you like. It's like it cannot be built up. It's actually falling apart is the best way to put it. It's kind of like if you, and Canada's a cold place today for most of us, except for here in Victoria, if you turned the heat off in your house and you left the furnace off, and it was minus 40 outside, and inside it was plus 20, within 10 hours, the temperature in the house would go down to 15. Within 3 days, the temperature in your house would probably go down to 0. This is the second law of thermodynamics. The heat will dissipate because of the cold temperature within the closed system around you. And the third law of thermodynamics takes this to the final, to the max, which is this. Eventually, a closed system will reach absolute zero, which, as you know, is in degrees Kelvin, 273 degrees Kelvin, which is zero. In that absolute state of absolute zero, there will be maximum randomness of the matter and the molecules and the energy field, and there will be a just want to clarify this one here. There will be a minimum value to the energy of it present in the closed system. Now, what's interesting about this is we back in 100 years ago, 50 years ago, when we were studying all of this as physicists, we realized that we thought, unfortunately, erroneously, didn't we, that the Earth was flat at one point and that the Earth was the center of our solar system. Well, we know that's not true. You know, and as William Blake, my favorite friend, always says, imagination will always eventually be proved to be science. So we now know that the three laws of thermodynamics actually in some ways are true and other ways are not true. The ways they are true are that entropy does happen. Things, in the words of Chinua Achebe, that great African man who got the Nobel Prize for Literature, and the title of his book is Things Fall Apart. That is a truth. It's a universal creation truth. And so we know that things will eventually fall apart, whether it's civilizations, Rome, Greece, China, Japan, Maya, Aztec, Inca, whatever. We also know that there's nothing you can do about it. These are natural cycles within the universe, and with all the way down to the mitochondrion, the cells in your body, the red blood cells, they eventually die, but they're replaced, and so on. So when we say things fall apart, entropy is in fact a universal kind of fact or factor activity. What is not true about the laws of thermodynamics, and they're almost irrelevant now, is the sense that there is no closed system. Not in chemistry, not in physics, not in biochemistry, not in the human body, not in anthropology, not in cosmology. There is always only one open, ever contracting and expanding, evolving system. And that's all that is in the entire universe, the multiverse. And to think that there are closed systems is erroneous because we now know that everything is interconnected and everything is contiguous, not just in time and space and motion, but beyond in higher dimensions of reality. There's always a flux between the higher vibrational dimensions, of which we still don't know enough because it's beyond the 11 dimensions of string theory. And there's always an interpenetration and an invisible, interconnected kind of flow and flux and movement of all things. And it all is based on consciousness, which is love, and it's based on energy, which is heat. And I would say, the law of thermodynamics should be the laws of spiritual thermodynamics, because when we talk about heat or energy as heat or thermal energy, it's spiritual fire we're talking about. That's the source of all that is. The sun's light is spiritual fire because the sun is a great cosmic being of Christ consciousness. And so we're talking about spiritual fire, which is the heat which creates something new in the world. So let's go back to what we're talking about. If it's true that entropy happens and that human beings live for a certain period and they die because eventually things fall apart in the body like an old car, and if you don't do something to keep it alive, resuscitate it with food or energy, it can fall apart. And something needs to be added to this so-called minimal closed system. And hopefully it's not a closed-minded system. Unfortunately, that can be the case with many people, but myself included. And that's why we're continuously wanting to open and expand to a new higher super consciousness, which will take us to the Christ Buddha consciousness and eventually to the cosmic consciousness. But for me to change my mindset and get out of my boxes or open my heart and get into emotional state or even heal my physical body, which I have done many times, and I'm hoping that I will eventually get to be much more of an expert at that in terms of healing my physical biochemistry and physiology and anatomy, there has to be an input of spiritual heat or fire or higher consciousness from outside into this system to make me metabolize, to grow and to evolve, and take in that energy that I was missing and needing in order to evolve and grow beyond where I am, to expand. Expand spiritually in my consciousness, expand in my mind and my capacity to understand all sciences of all times, and that's my goal. I'm hoping I'm getting a little bit on my fingernail here towards that. Expand emotionally, expand psychologically, expand anthropologically in terms of my understanding of civilizations. The goal here is to know when you're falling apart as an entropy and you're aware that something's creating more tension and pressure, as we said in our last video, you need to call upon a higher force that is beyond your present state of equilibrium or entropy and expand through the induction and acceptance of some other force field of electromagnetic and magnetic force. And this can be many, many different things, but it all does come down to one thing. It is the superconscious, cosmic consciousness, the dark energy, and the Christ consciousness that will instruct you and expand you beyond where you've been so that your next spiritual in-breath, your psychological, mental, emotional in-breath will break down the barriers, eradicate and stop the process of entropy that was breaking you down and killing you. And I mean that symbolically and literally. And allow you to come alive again to a higher expansion level of a greater, higher vibration. I do mean cycles per second vibration in your body, in your energy field, in your brain waves, and to allow something stronger and greater to help you evolve, because contraction and expansion is the way of the universe and the way of every cell, and is the way of every human being. If you were to take a life study of yourself or anyone else around you, you will see that over many lives, and particularly we can just take this life, that your life has gone through many contractions, and however you want to value that psychologically and on a feeling level, and expansions beyond that. Typically, within personality psychology, it's the ego that contracts, causes fear and doubt and hopelessness and depression, and you can stay stuck in that till the day you die, or you can allow that contraction to surrender, open, allow, accept, and receive the blessing of a higher consciousness, which is a spiritual fire, to expand you and break the ego, break the little mind boxes, break the walls of steel and iron around your heart, and allow some flow into your physical body so your physical body once again can be rejuvenated. Now, this is going to be the topic of yet another video, but I do want to add it in here as a really exciting kind of beauty of thought and experience that you can look forward to. Some of you may already be in it. The message of all the great spiritual teachers, and at this point we'll just mention Jesus, is that he came to earth and he mentioned the fact that the little box that, of our evolution and survival of the fittest and so on, as we've gone through millions of years of human evolution here, is kept us in the dark and kept us in a box, particularly at this time in the 21st century. What he came to show, and this is based on also Vedanta yoga and the whole notion of what can be done when you do a deep, high meditation with the light in your third eye and opening the heart to the magnetism of the light inside you, which is one with the source of all that is. When that experience is true and real for you, and it can be ongoing, 365 and a quarter days a year, in that divine union of yourself with the source and all that is, you will find the final and the ultimate liberation or expansion out of the little box of the animal coat that you're wearing at this point, and into a much higher vibrational consciousness, super consciousness of all that is, so that you understand experientially in this moment and every moment that there is something great that you can move towards to. You don't have to fall down towards the death of the physical body, which some unfortunately still seem to think means the death of the soul. Now you get many tries at contraction and expansion over many lifetimes with your consciousness to take yourself back up to the higher level where your unique individual light spark eventually will join with the light of all that is in the cosmic, infinite, eternal, ever-expanding light, which is the pure love of Source. Well, that's been a lot to chew on for one video. We will return to this time and again from many different facets of the same diamond to look at it with different language and amplify this with further language and concepts. And it's like, this is a time in our technology where we were amplifying or expanding our sense of all the electromagnetic waves, whether the radio waves or television waves or higher gamma rays and so on. These rays are what we're talking about here. It's something that your consciousness and ourselves as society and our science is expanding into with a higher awareness of the vibrations of the source. And physics and spirituality and mysticism are becoming one, and hopefully you'll experience some of this in your own personal life as you continue to study, use your logic, your intention, and your willpower to move forward and expand back home into all that is. Well, what a joy it is to have you with me again, Dr. Joseph Martin. All my love and blessings to you, and as we say, Om Namah Shivaya.